There's a power in the bodhicitta, in the heart's inclination, not only just for our own freedom, but for the freedom of every being, for the freedom of the whole. So gratitude for all of you that come and show up for this Sangha. And gratitude for these precious bodies that allow us to be here, that allow us to experience, for this mind that can recognize itself eventually and have that guide us how we walk in this earth. Gratitude for this earth that provides not only these bodies, but everything that sustains these bodies through a whole life. Gratitude for other beings that share this biosphere with us. Gratitude for the ancestors that knew how to live in harmony and whose knowledge we're trying to regain. So I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Supreme Mother, the perfection of sublime knowing. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Supreme Mother, the perfection of sublime knowing. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha. I take refuge in the Supreme Mother, the perfection of sublime knowing. And then the bodhicitta that comes from Dzogchen, for the sake of everything that is arising, may I reach complete enlightenment. For the sake of everything that is arising, may I reach complete enlightenment. For the sake of everything that is arising, may I reach complete understanding. We use understanding and enlightenment, at different times use one or the other. They're essentially the same. The theme for this evening is our original nature, and then the intimacy of embodiment. And I'm remembering the last BIPOC retreat at Spirit Rock. It was the theme of it was the sacredness, the sacredness of all of us and of everything. And like Rumi's poem saying, we're stuck, we have no choice but to go back to the source. And there seems to be a relationship between the intensity of times and the support for awakening. And Padmasambhava, who brought Buddhism into Tibet, used to say that the times of greatest degeneration were also the times of greatest spiritual accomplishment, because it's sort of like the friction and the difficulties push us to go back to the source. And so it certainly feels like we're in one of those times right now. And I just wanted to begin. There's a book that I have used a lot in my study groups, The Crystal and the Way of Light, and it's by Namkhai Norbu Rinpoche. He's a Tibetan Lama who passed away just a couple of years ago, not long ago. And in this book, it has a whole Dzogchen path in it, and it gets to areas that are quite advanced, but it's made in a way that's very accessible. So when he's talking about the base, like what are we at the core? It says the base, or Z in Tibetan, is a term used to denote the fundamental ground of existence, both at the universal level and at the level of the individual, the two being essentially the same. To realize the one is to realize the other. If you realize yourself, you realize the nature of the universe. And so today we began, our meditation by really tuning in to, and in a way, shifting the habitual way that we relate to this body, and to see if we could open a door of incredibly deep appreciation. Like, you know, this doorway, if you open that doorway of beginning to realize that this physical body is what we have. This is, like I say, this is our chariot for experience. No matter what it looks like, no matter all the aches and pains, it is an amazing body. What this body does, what it's capable of understanding, there's nothing like it, at least in our biosphere. So beginning, and it is a process, and as you learn to come into greater and greater and greater intimacy with the body, you know, you can sometimes I take my feet, like before I go to sleep or when I first get up, you know, the feet can be kind of dead, you know, not very sensitive. And you can work them and you can massage your toes and appreciate and appreciate and appreciate. This is like your, it's almost like having a beautiful musical instruments that you play and you oil it and you take care of it and you appreciate it. This is kind of the same way. This is the best instrument, you know, and the most amazing. So attending to it, it may not be something you've thought about before, but the more intimate you become with your body, the deeper your mind is going to open. And so we burn a lot of energy being caught up in mixed feelings about the body and about our own life and our own existence and the details of our lives. And so in the process of finding freedom, one of the things that underlies that process is opening the heart further and further and further and further. So we are not holding back on our own capacity to appreciate our own individual life, our own, starting with the body. Because, and it's not, and to not get confused where you are going to put up with something that is unhealthy, or it's the capacity to open your heart to what's already there, to your own direct experience. And as we meditate, we will realize that as we tune in, you know, we may be able to become aware of that. You can almost touch that there's an inner stillness. Sometimes, even if you're busy, you can, if you have the intention to notice the stillness within, that's a doorway. So you can find the stillness, even if you're in the middle of activity. There's like a still point. There's a stillness that coexists. In fact, all the activity is happening within the context of that stillness. So there's the inner stillness. Then there's the inner silence. Even if the mind is busy, or, you know, or you're talking, you're engaged, you can still reference back to the inner silence. And the third is inner spaciousness. And the inner spaciousness is, first of all, is non-conceptual. But the inner spaciousness, when we touch it, is the most transformative, because the inner spaciousness takes us into the depths of what we actually are, what our essential nature actually is. And these inner refuges of inner silence, stillness, spaciousness, in a way, they're like source aspects of the awakened mind. Source, because if you think of spaciousness, space, all that manifests is manifesting from the ground of space, coming into existence and disappearing back into the space. All the movement is originating in stillness. There's stillness, and then we make a movement, and then, we fall back into the stillness. So it's like the source of the movement is the stillness. The source of the embodiment or even the thinking is the spaciousness. And then with stillness, again, movement and stillness, and then the thoughts and the sounds, they're, like right now, I'm speaking. In between the words, there's silence. So the words, the sounds are emerging out of the silence and they disappear back into the silence. I make a thought, and the thought is gone. Space. I move around, and all of a sudden I stop, and there's stillness. So this relationship between spaciousness and form and stillness and movement and silence and sound, this is the way all of life manifests. Sort of coming back into the source, and in fact, the inner silence, the stillness, the spaciousness, they're just aspects of our awakened mind. These are just aspects of the profundity of what we are. So by tuning into them, it's almost like they give us a little handle where there is no handle, because our essential nature is boundless, profound, empty of content, and yet this cognizance, this knowing that is not necessarily, it's not mediated by concepts. It's a direct knowing that's not labeling everything. Oh, that's a frame, or that's a chair, or that's a this or that. The minute we put a label on something, we are once removed from the thing, the experience. Because language, we made up language. Humans made up language. And it's very useful. We can communicate. But language, we became totally identified with the language and forgot that there was a ground before the language. So whenever I speak about this, I always go back to what we're like when we're born. We're born with a little body that can sensorially, feel and receive experience. Even when, at first we can't even focus our eyes, we can't necessarily see very clearly, but we're still receiving images, and feelings. Everything is being registered. It's like all of life is raining on us, and we are not rejecting anything. We don't have a way to reject. We don't have a conceptual framework to reject with. So we're utterly, utterly open. And so that, there isn't a full enlightenment when we're born, because we haven't gone through a whole process of acquiring experience and making sense of it, understanding it in a broader context. But there are aspects of the utterly open mind of us when we are babies that is similar to as we develop in our spiritual practice, and we go through all the concentration, and we go through the whole process of learning to incline the heart in a way that is beneficial to us, to ourselves, and to our world. So that if we're not inclined the right way, we're not going to find freedom. We can try and manipulate things to get what we want, but that is not real freedom. That's not sacred. That's not the real thing. So we use the practice of cultivation first to steady the mind, to concentrate it enough so that we can actually literally see beyond the conceptual mind that's always chattering away. And so when that one gets a little bit quieter, you start to see that there's space between the thoughts, space between, primarily the thoughts. And then you start getting interested. What's in there? What's in that space when you're not proliferating thoughts? Our essential nature is there. And when we start, the thing, they say the difference between a Buddha and an ordinary being is that the Buddha recognizes her or his essential nature, and the ordinary being doesn't. We don't. We get little glimpses, but those glimpses are important. And we don't live within cultures that say, oh, that's actually important. Pay attention to that. Stay connected to that. Learn to recognize it when it's there. But one of the things we may notice when we touch into that is we may feel the silence. Something, and see what happens to your heart. Like for some people I know that this is opening up. Sometimes people just cry. There's sometimes grief that comes when it really opens, because it's like we feel like how long we've been gone from that. That's real home. That's landing back home. And so when we come home like that, all of a sudden, the first thing we want to do is cry about it, because we've been gone for so long, and so has our world. But then you notice that there's a peace, there's rest. It's the deepest rest we could ever experience, is to actually land back home like that. So you can feel the silence, the stillness, the spaciousness, and the peace. And even no matter what we are going through in our life, if we can at least get little bits of time experiencing this, little by little, we notice that there's a certain capacitance that starts to happen. And sometimes I say capacitance because sometimes I think of it like, electrical wires. If they're not thick enough, they cannot carry the voltage. Like the voltage of our life seems to be cranking up and cranking up. And so it's like we need the capacitance to deal with this life the way it is right now. And a lot of what we have to face cannot be faced with the ordinary mind alone. Our ordinary mind is just a collection of past experience and the extrapolations we make from it. It is limited, extremely limited. It's functional, and we all are working with it and relate and move about in this world working with it. But it's very important that we realize that the intellect has its limitations, and that the freedom, the deep capacity, the capacity that allows us to do sometimes miraculous things, it's not coming from our personality. The ordinary mind is coming from that ground. And when you start to feel that ground, then you realize it's like you look around you and you start to notice that everything, not only beings, but even objects, there's like this quality of isness to everything. So this quality of isness itself, that is like you start to see reality as what it is. It's like they say even any object can wake us up. And I don't have Dogen's book right here with me, but I'll try and tell you what I remember from. But Dogen was the founder of Soto Zen. And I love his writings. And I love his writings because I think he was influenced by the Taoists. And so his relationship to the natural world, and not only the natural world, but objects, like even objects, is he realized that anything can wake us up. Anything. If we have the right perception, anything can be sort of a reminder of awakened mind. And one quote from the Wholehearted Way, the Bendawa, goes something like this: there is a way, and by the way, Zazen, the way he describes it, is actually resting in the nature of mind. Not just any, concentration or whatever, but really resting in that ground. So that is his Zazen. And so he says, there is a way in which the incomparable awareness of all things returns to the person in Zazen, and whereby that person and the myriad things, intimately and imperceptibly assist each other, fences and walls, grasses and trees, demonstrate and uphold it for the sake of living beings. And in turn, living beings, you say something like elaborate and unfold it for the sake of grasses and trees, fences and walls. But these intimate relationships do not mix into the mind of the person sitting, because they're happening in stillness without any fabrication, and they are enlightenment itself. So he is really speaking. Once there is the recognition of our ground, and we start to, I often talk about relaxing back. You know, we're all really busy going forward. And so it's like we have to relax back and receive life as opposed to pursuing it. Receive experience. And then we start to see, you know, like sometimes there's an object that we love, you know, I don't know, just I have a basket across from me and it's got these colors, and it's just like our ability to appreciate. And it's not like I have to remember who made the basket or anything, but just the isness of the basket itself. Just appreciate the beauty and have a sense of gratitude for that object. That object brings me closer to home. And so just like we were with the meditation, using the meditation, appreciating the body, it's like whatever, I remember Alice Walker once said something, whatever we love can be saved. I never forgot that. And I thought, what all does she mean by that? But I think that if it's this kind of appreciation and love, the thing that we're appreciating and loving can bring us back home to our essence. If it's not the ordinary grasping kind of wanting or liking, but this appreciation is free. It's this, we are melting in appreciation of something. Then that frees our heart, and it frees our heart into the ground of being. So Dogen is speaking about that. And I was reading another book about, this time, Suzuki Roshi, a bunch of quotes from Suzuki Roshi. And Suzuki Roshi was, brought Zoto Zen to the Bay Area, and he started Zen Center. And he was a really quirky teacher and beautiful, I just love. And he said, a student of his had some very deep experiences, and he told her that she had an enlightenment experience. And we can have this experience, doesn't mean that we kind of like stabilize it and are enlightened completely, but we can have this experience. He says, but now that you have had that and you've taken care of yourself because you sort of landed there, then you take care of everything else. And then he started picking up objects. Then you take care of this, and you take care of this, and you take care of this, and you just kept picking up objects. And he's basically saying the same thing that Dogen is saying, that once we land home like that, then that's why, the Bodhisattva vow, which we take deliberately, the Bodhisattva inclination arises spontaneously from that ground of being. When we touch into that, there's this upwelling of wanting to dedicate ourselves to the benefit of all. And what Dogen is pointing to, and Suzuki Roshi is saying the same thing, he's picking up all these objects. Now you take care of everything. Now you took care of yourself, you found your way home, now you take care of everything else. All the things, even things. And there's another beautiful story where he also of enjoyment. Suzuki Roshi's going to the park, Golden Gate Park, and they're having some kind of picnic or something, and there's a baby blanket on the ground, and there's probably a baby around. And Suzuki Roshi makes a beeline for the baby blanket, lies down on it, wraps himself on it, and just kind of like relishes, almost as if he was experiencing himself being a baby again. That kind of spontaneity and capacity to just enjoy. That's the joy of landing back home. We can do that, and we're not imprisoned by conventional reality and by the conventions of the culture. And one of the things that I've been ruminating with more and more and more recently is just, what's the impact of living within cultures of domination for so long? Not only the colonized world, but before that. We have been living under cultures of domination of one kind or another, perhaps thousands of years. And so that's done something to our human soul. And it's done something to our capacity to recognize our essence, to come back home, to enjoy. It's like the aspect of enjoyment. The word eros, which comes from the Greek, they often just equate eros with sexuality, which is not. Eros is about the essence of life. It's like life wants to live. Life wants to enjoy itself. And it's like that memory of Suzuki Roshi wrapping himself in that baby blanket and just letting himself be a baby again. That is the freedom. That is the freedom. And so it's not just all serious. It's also being able to enjoy the pleasure that's involved in living. Because we have so much pain and so much difficulty. That needs to be tempered a little bit by opening the possibilities for enjoyment. And our brain, it has, as some of you already know, is hardwired to remember everything that's threatening because it's part of the survival mechanism. So we have to work to cultivate and notice the pleasant experience and hold on to them for a while so that we start changing the pathways in our brain. But it's also finding our way back to eros, to that which wants to dance. One of my friends from Ghana once said, we don't dance because it's a special occasion. We dance because we are alive. And so coming back home, we can find our way to dance just because we are here and we are alive. To dance with life and not wait until all the problems get resolved. They won't. So we have to learn to dance alongside all the difficulties that we're facing, to find that which brings us pleasure, which brings us joy. And I think I want to stop here so that I can take a few questions. And again, thank you for your precious hearts. And this is my favorite Sangha. Thank you again. Blessings all around. Yeah. We all face that. And so one of the things to realize is that, we could spend our entire life suppressing our joy and suppressing ourselves, and still that won't necessarily make other people happy. There'll still be something to complain about. And the most important part is to find a way to work with yourself so that you value and you find the context, you find the place where you can experience that joy. Or let's say, you don't want to go, face some, do a demonstration or something like that. And you need to, for your soul, for staying power, we need to balance things. And so you have to make it okay for yourself. And then you have to, deal with how the other people are evaluating it or how they're thinking about it. But the most important thing is to give yourself permission to cultivate that joy. And there are all kinds of, cultural dictums that we should never be happy. I mean, we should just keep our nose to the grindstone. But we can't last like that. We get worn out. We don't have, our life won't be so long. I mean, we get worn down. So there needs to be a balance. And so, and then just practicing loving kindness towards yourself, coming up with phrases of compassion. May I be able to love this life completely as it is. May I appreciate and love this heart exactly as it is. Things like that, where you're using almost like meta type of practice to allow. In some of the deepest teachings of Dzogchen, the ultimate, if they say, we remain in an attitude of allowing. And what is it that we allow? We allow the truth of our experience. And the people may not necessarily get it. A lot of times other people don't get it. But we can't arrange our entire life to please other people. So we got to find some kind of balance there. The ground of being, these are like almost synonyms with our true nature. The ground of being, there's sometimes they make a slight difference, but our true nature, that's not conditioned, our unconditioned nature, what we begin to get a glimpse of when we, let's say, notice the space between thinking, and there's the space where there's no concept, we're not thinking, we're just being in that space. That is the doorway into the ground of being. And that ground of being is universal. It doesn't change no matter what culture we come from. It's beyond all of the conditioned life. And access to that, there's a power, understanding, perspective, capacity, strength, all these qualities arise from that ground. And then that's why I feel like the work with our communities is so important, access to that ground, because it is what ultimately liberates. And that liberation is not dependent on conditions. The more grounded we are and having access to that, the more freedom we experience in our lives. And sometimes the conditions get optimized, like things get easier, but sometimes they don't. But how we are experiencing them and how we're working with them, there's way more freedom. I mean, my conditions, let's say with the family, are harder now than they were years ago. They're much harder. But I have way more freedom. And sometimes I stay up all night, I can't sleep, But I'm not suffering in the same way I used to suffer when I was younger. There's been, like I say, a capacitance. And so one of the things that happens, with tuning into that ground is that you start to see how the whole thing is organized, how all these cultures are organized to perpetuate certain power struggles, how cultures of domination work, and patriarchy. And we've been under that for a long time. And so you start to really, really see how that works. And being able to see how that works, people who have privilege don't even begin to see how that works. And that understanding, a jump from that understanding to understanding how our personality is put together, how we have identified with just a collection of experiences. And the thing is that this is the tricky part, that true freedom of non-duality involves opening to the non-conceptual ground and at the same time honoring and not bypassing our conditioned life. Because within the matrix of everything we go through is the doorway to freedom. There's an understanding when our heart opens, when we overcome a certain obstacle, and there's an ease that happens. That ease opens back into the ground of being. And so we each have our own, the matrix of our own life is what we work with. It's what we have to work. It's what we got to be here with. It's not only the body, it's our whole life. We are born into karmic streams. And this is the, again, the chariot we got, and we work it and we work it, and it's that work leads us back into freedom. There's a it's like we go through a process of resolving issues, resolving wounds, healing, and we cannot heal in isolation, And so our communities, I speak a lot about our inner work, but we are social beings and we're embedded in communities. And so each of our communities being mirrored back, being understood, we all need to be received and understood. When we are received and understood, our nervous system relaxes. And when our nervous system relaxes, access to the ground of being is that much easier. If we are rattled because there's nobody's getting us, it's hard to open up to our essence because we're too rattled. We need to be held, just like that baby blanket. Everybody needs, a place to land again like that. So thank you again for your practice, and by the merit generated through our practice. May our humanity find its way to our ground again, so that real understanding dawns again, and that there is justice and peace in our world, and that love prevails. May it be so.